guys, it's me. Okay, we're close to the end. I mean, like end. We have today's assignment and like one or two more, and then you have your quiz on Friday, and that's it. Like, that's it. You're done for the year. No, I'm not doing any exam for y'all. No 6 weeks exam. I had to for Algebra 1. Y'all lucked out. You're not having to do it. So, I mean, I'm happy. I'm sure you are. I wish I didn't have to do the poor 8th and 9th graders that, you know, with an exam, but it is what it is. Okay, so let's get started. We're doing 11.2. Radical equations. Okay, radical equations. All right, I'm going to do like a crash course on this. Okay, y'all ready? All right, I took notes, but I don't like them. Okay, I'm just going to do examples, like lots and lots of examples, and then I'll explain as we go. Okay, that should be helpful. Like I said, this is just a crash course. You'll be doing more of this next year, but it's good that y'all get introduced to this stuff. It is pre-algebra. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, and I'm going to go step by step. Okay, so, whoops, that's not right. All right. So what the whole idea is, we're going to try to get an answer. We're trying to find out what x is, okay? So let's say I have the square root of x equals 4. Okay, so what you do, and I'm going to write this, I should write the steps. Now, we want to find out what equals x, but it's under the square root thing here, right? So the first thing you do is square both sides. Guys, I know I'm all over the place here, so just bear with me. It's so hard doing this from home. I know it's hard on your end too. All right, so I'm going to square both sides. Okay? Now, if you remember, this is square root. This means square root. So it's like a perfect square. For example, if I had this, square root of 25 is 5, because 5 times 5 is that, right? Well, if I square the square root, I'm left with just x. Whatever is under here, it's taken out of the square. Okay? What's 4 squared? It's 4 times 4. It's 16. That is your answer. If we were in the classroom, I'd explain it better, the logistics behind it, to give you a better understanding, but we are not in the classroom, and I know for a fact some of you are not watching the videos. So I want to just give you a bunch of examples. Next year, it's going to be completely different. You'll have a better explanation. Ooh, what am I doing here? That's the wrong one. That's the wrong example. Where did I get that example? Dadgummit. Okay, so let's do another one. That's like in your book example. We'll come back to that. It's the same thing. I'm a mess today, y'all. This is the skills check. Number 1, what I'm doing here, okay? And this is really actually number 1. I'm all over the place. Look, I even have notes, and I'm still a mess. Okay, so we want to find out what x means. This is skill check number 1. You can see that in your book, okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to square both sides. See, square both sides. Okay? Now, the square of the square root of x is just x, and 7 times 7 is 49. So there's your answer. Let's do another. Square root of x equals 50. Again, it's like we're isolating the variable. We're looking for what x means. All right, so we have everything on this side and the square on this side. So we're going to square both sides. And we're left with x equals 50 times 50 is 2,500. Now, 3 is a little different, and here I can give you some answers. Whenever the square root equals, a negative, there is no real solution. Notice that we have the square root on this side, and on this side we have a negative. Because we have the square root on one side and the negative on the other, the answer is no real solution. You cannot have a square root equal a negative. Okay? Okay. And again, I'm going to do, you should see, I've got 2 papers worth of examples to do, so don't stress. X equals 12. Okay, so we're going to square both sides. Okay, this now becomes just x because we took it out of the square root. 12 times 12 is 144. Okay? All right. Now, all right, when solving radical equations, step 1, we're going to kind of like go a little bit further than what we just did. You're going to isolate the radical on one side of the equation. Guys, this is the same as isolating the variable. Same as isolating the variable. Intruder alert. Okay? It's like what y'all been doing. It's isolating the variable, and it's like intruder alert. You've done this many, many, many times this year. Step 2. You're going to do what we just did. You're going to square both sides of the equation. I should have probably written these steps first. Step 3, and we just did that, squaring both sides of the equation. That's what we did. Basically, this is already isolated. This is already isolated, and then we square both sides. Okay? This is already isolated. It's all by itself, and then we have a number over here. We squared both sides, and we got an answer. So 3 says, step 3, solve the resulting equation if necessary. And then 4, check. Y'all never check. I've yet to have a student on this in all my 25 or so years of teaching that have checked anything. Some of you may be the first, but it's okay. I've kind of explained it. You just put it back in, but we're going to move on. Okay, so with that, I'm going to do several examples. Which one goes with, I don't want to give you the wrong thing. All right, I got my papers ready. Okay, so I'm going to do the next skills check. I'm doing skill check number 2. Okay, you can find that in your book. It doesn't have the answers, but I'm working these problems with you. Okay, I'm working these and the ones like the odds that you're going to be doing. All right, so skill check number 1. It says 3x plus 18 equals 27. Okay? All right, so we need to isolate the radical. We're going to isolate the radical just like we would the variable. Let's pretend that this whole thing is a variable, but this is the radical that they're talking about. We need to isolate it, make it all by itself. So we need to move the 18 first. We need to get it to this side, so this will be all by itself. If we're adding 18, we do the opposite. So we're going to subtract 18 because it's the opposite. Those cancel out, and I'm left with the radical of 3x, square root of 3x, equals 27 minus 18 is 9. Okay, so now we have isolated the radical, got it all by itself, and we have a number all by itself. So now we're doing step 2, square both sides of the equation. That's what we did at the beginning of this lesson. So I'm going to square both sides of the equation. Now, if you remember from the beginning of this lesson, when you square this, it basically takes it out of the radical, out of the square root. So if you square the square root of 3x, you're left with just plain old 3x. And 9 times 9, 9 squared is 81. Now, step 3 says solve the resulting equation if necessary. Well, we need to solve. We can't just leave it like this because we need to have like x equals something. So now we divide both sides by 3 because we're multiplying. So we have to do the opposite, and that's divide. We're left with x equals 27. Okay? Let's look at 2. 2 is the square root of x plus 4 equals 1. Okay, we need to, step 1 is to isolate the radical. Here's your radical. We need to isolate it, get it all by itself, and we need to get rid of this 4. It's plus 4 to get rid of it. To move it to the other side of this equal sign, we do the opposite. And so I'm left with the square root of x equals a positive and negative, you subtract, so that would be -3. All right, so now we're going to square both sides. This would be step 2. Step 2, square both sides. All right, so if I square this radical, I'm left with x equals -3. Oh, dear. Notice that negative. I actually took it a step too far. See that negative? No negative. Because of that negative, the answer is no real solution. See, it got me too. And I even have notes sitting here. As soon as I start doing it, oh, you can't do that. You cannot have a negative right here. Can't do it. So if you end up isolating the variable, by the way, I'll put a little star here. To find the no real solutions, I can't even spell today. It's not even after midnight. To find no real solutions, you must isolate the radical first. Okay, that should be 2 stars. Okay, so to be able to find the no real solution answers, you need to isolate the radical first, just like we did. In fact, once you get to here, you see the radical is already isolated, and on the other side of the equal sign, you see that that's a negative. Right then and there, that's going to be your little, warning that it's a no solution, no real solution answer. Okay, you cannot have a negative on that side. Okay, we're going to do a whole bunch more, so don't stress. All right, so number 3, I have square root of 2x minus 5 equals negative 3. Okay, we got to isolate the radical. Here is my radical, and I need to get rid of the negative 5. To be able to get rid of that negative 5 and bring it to this side of the equal sign, we have to do the opposite, minus 5. So then we're going to add 5 to both sides. It doesn't sound like it, boys and girls, but I actually do know what I'm talking about. All right, square root of 2x is what we're left with. That radical equals, this is 2. All right, so this is not a negative, so we can keep working. All right, so to get rid of that, we need to square both sides. That's step 2. Okay, so we're left with just 2x equals, what's 2 squared? 4. Okay, we're not done. Step 3 tells us to go ahead and solve if necessary. Well, x is not by itself, so we have to keep going. Since we're multiplying here, we need to divide both sides by 2. So x then equals 2, and there's our answer. All right, I'm going to do 4 right here. Squeeze it in. Okay, so I have the square root of 68 plus x, bring that over there, equals 8. All right, so guys, notice that all of this is under the radical sign, right? So we have already isolated the radical. There, like right here, we had negative 5, and over here we had a plus 4 and a plus 18. Okay, well, here, this is all we've got. We don't have to move anything. And so we've isolated the radical already. So now all we have to do is square both sides. Okay, so we're going to square both sides. Once we have this squared, we're left with 68 plus x equals, what's 8 times 8? 64. Now we can move stuff around. Okay? We got to get rid of this because we want x all by itself. So I'm going to subtract 68 on both sides because there's no sign in front of that 68. Therefore, it's a positive. So the opposite of a positive is a negative. So we're going to subtract. And I get x equals negative 4. This is okay. You can have a negative right here. Okay? You cannot have a negative here when the x over here is still under the radical sign. So this is a no, okay? The answer is no real solution. This is okay. There's no radical sign over here. Do y'all see the difference? Make sure you notice that. Again, this radical x, the square root of x equals negative 3. That's a no-no. No real solution. But regular x equals negative 4 is okay. You can do that. Okay, number 5. This is going to be a little weirder. 9 times. Notice how I read that. 9 times the square root of x plus 1 equals negative 108. Okay. Just because there's a negative over there does not mean it's no real solution. You have to first isolate the radical. We have this 9 here. We have to get rid of it first before we know if this is if there's no real solution or not. So if 9 is being multiplied with the square root of x plus 1, again, we're multiplying here, right? The opposite is division. We're going to divide both sides by 9. Again, because that 9 is being multiplied with this whole term right here. That cancels out, and I'm left with the square root of x plus 1 equals negative 108 divided by 9 is negative 12. Now, we have isolated this radical, okay? And now we can see there's a negative here. No negative. So then the answer to this is no real solution. But you have to isolate this first. Have to isolate the radical first before you know it's no real solution. Okay? Because this, we don't know yet because of that 9. Once we got rid of the 9 and we're left with, we isolated this radical, then we can determine if it's no real solution or not. All right, number 6. 4 times 2x plus 1 equals 24. Okay, just like number 5, we have to get rid of that 4 to isolate the radical. So if 4 is being multiplied by this, the opposite is division. And I'm left with square root of 2x plus 1 equals 6. Because 24 divided by 4 is 6. Okay, this is not a negative, so we can move on. So now we're going to square both sides. Okay, once we square that, we're left with just plain old 2x plus 1, and 6 squared is 36. All right, we need to get rid of that 1, because we got to isolate the variable. Oh, I'm losing space here. Minus 1, and I'm left with 2x equals 35. Okay, so I'm still not done. You can't tell me that 2x equals 35 because that doesn't help me. I have to know what does x mean, so we have to keep going. This is multiplying, so the opposite is division. So x equals 35 divided by 2 is 17.5. Okay? All right, let's now open our books to page 459. Okay, 459. If you notice, I've already done number 1 for you because I got confused. Number 1 is this right here. So look in your book. The directions say solve and check the following equations. If no answer exists, state no real blah blah. So here you go. This is the problem. Remember, we're isolating the variable, trying to get x all by itself. So we squared both sides, and I get x equals 16. So now we did number 1. All right, 3. The square root of x equals 15. All right, it's already isolated, so we're on to step 2. We got to remember, see what x equals. So we're going to square both sides, and I'm left with the when you square the square root of anything, it's itself. And 15 squared means 15 times 15. So I hope y'all are remembering that. My gosh, everyone makes that mistake, even your math teacher. You get 225. Okay? All right, number 5. 2 times x equals 36. Okay, this is not completely isolated because we have a 2 there, so we need to get rid of the 2. We get rid of the 2 because it's multiplying 2 times the square root of x, so we're going to divide 2 on both sides because we're doing the opposite. So that cancels out, and I'm left with the square root of x equals 36 divided by 2 is 18. Okay, that's not a negative, right? So we're going to keep on moving. The next step is to square both sides. So I'm going to square both sides. Oops. This will leave me with x. 18 squared means 18 times 18 gives me 324. Now, if you are catching on, y'all can start pausing the video and working it yourself and see if you get the right answer. I would strongly suggest that because then you're kind of doing it on your own, okay? Don't do the whole thing because I am doing a lot of odds. Do one problem at a time. Because then you'll get discouraged if you just spent a whole lot of time doing all the problems and they're all wrong. Okay, so negative 3 times the square root of x equals negative 18. Okay, guys, don't get confused. Yes, there's a negative over here. Yes, there is a negative over here. But we have not isolated the radical yet. We have not isolated the radical. So we need to get rid of that negative 3 first. That negative 3 is being multiplied with that square root of x, so we're going to divide, because that's the opposite, both sides by negative 3. Those cancel out, and I'm left with the square root of x equals negative divided by negative gives me what? Positive. So negative 18 divided by negative 3 is a positive 6. Now do you see why this would not have been no real solution? That's a common mistake because y'all just, oh, there's a negative, and then y'all are done. You have to isolate the I keep wanting to say variable, but it's the same idea. You need to isolate the radical first. Get rid of that negative 3, and you see it now becomes a positive. So we can continue. We're going to square both sides. So when you square the square root of x, you're left with x. And 6 squared is 6 times 6, and you get 36. That's a tricky one, so be very careful. All right, number 9. Again, pause the video, come back and see if you got it right. Tricky ones, you know, don't beat yourself up if you missed that one. Okay. Square root of x minus 7 equals negative 3. Okay, we have to isolate the radical, so that means we got to get rid of the negative 7 first. And yes, I see there's a negative there, but we have not isolated the radical yet. We can only make the decision on no real solutions once we isolate it. So we're going to add 7 to both sides, and because of that, we now have positive 4, because negative 3 and positive 7 is positive 4. We don't have a negative there anymore, so we can continue. And I'm squaring both sides. That leaves me with x equals 16. Okay, 11. 3 plus the square root of x equals 19. Okay, what do we have to get rid of first? 3. That is a positive 3 because there's no sign in front of it. So to get rid of it, we have to subtract 3 from both sides. And I'm left with the square root of x equals 16. Okay, that's positive. We've isolated the radical. We're ready to go. I'm going to square both sides. I'm left with x equals 16 squared is 16 times 16. You get 256. Okay. Almost done, guys. I have 3 more. All right, 13. 5 times the square root of x minus 2 equals negative 15. Okay, guys, there's a negative there, but we cannot decide if it's no real solution yet because we have not isolated the radical. We have to get rid of that 5. That 5 is being multiplied with that radical, so you have to do the opposite, so we're going to divide both sides by 5. And that leaves the square root of x minus 2 equals negative 15 divided by 5, positive 5. That's going to be negative 3. We can stop right there. No need to even square both sides because we have isolated the radical and there's a negative right here. We cannot have a negative. So then your answer is no real solution. Please be very careful to make sure you isolate it before making that decision, or you could get a wrong answer. Always isolate first. Okay, 15. The square root of 3x equals 30. Okay, it's already isolated for you. The radical's all by itself. So we can go ahead and square both sides. Okay, so I'm left with 3x because the square of the square root of 3x is just 3x. And 30 squared is 30 times 30, and that gives me 900. Okay, I need to get that x all by itself, so I need to get rid of the 3. Since the 3 and the x are multiplying, we do the opposite, which is division. So we're going to divide both sides by 3. And I get x equals 300. There we are. Okay, last one. And I definitely want every one of you to pause this. And then work it out on your own, and then see if you get the right answer. 3 times square root of x plus 7 equals 43. Okay, now we have to get rid of that 3, but we have to get rid of that positive 7 as well. So which one, based on what you've learned this year, do I do first? The 3 or the number all by itself? Hint, hint. We're going to get rid of the 7 first. You have to get rid of the 7 first, the number that's all by itself. So I'm going to subtract 7 on both sides. I'm left with 3 times the square root of x equals, what's 43 minus 7? 36. Now I can get rid of that 3. You remember, we're trying to isolate the radical. So I'm going to get rid of that 3. Since we're multiplying, I'm dividing both sides by 3. And I get the square root of x equals 12. Okay, now I've isolated the radical. It's all by itself. So now we square both sides. Okay, I'm left with x equals 12 squared is 12 times 12, 144. That's it. Okay, guys, I'm setting you free. You are doing page 459 to 460. You're doing numbers 2 through 18 even. These are due Wednesday. And you have a quiz Friday. You are almost done, guys. Almost done. Okay, if you need anything, let me know. But you must watch the entire video before I jump in and reteach, because I'll be doing the same examples again. Okay, but we'll just go step by step. But I will know if you didn't watch the video. I will know. So I'm there for you. If you watch the entire video, you did these on your own and then, pause the video, then I'm there for you. Okay? Ask me anything. All right, take care. See y'all later.